When I came back to my father's house, it was late afternoon. The light was soft and gold, falling on the front steps like it used to when I was a girl. I had not seen this house for many years, but everything felt the same, only quieter. The trees in the yard were older, their branches touching the windows. The paint on the porch was cracked. Even the air smelled like it had when I was young. A mix of dust, apples, and something sweet that came from the garden. I stood for a moment, holding my small bag, not sure if I was ready to walk in. Inside, the air was cool. I heard the slow sound of my father's chair moving in the living room. He was reading, as always, and did not see me at first. When he looked up, his face was thinner than I remembered, and his eyes were softer. He smiled in a tired way. He said my name slowly, as if to make sure I was real. I had come home to take care of him because he was not well anymore. My brothers and sisters were far away, busy with their lives, but I had time and nowhere else to go. That evening, I made us dinner. My father talked about the church, about the people who still visited him, about small things from the town. His voice shook a little, but he tried to sound cheerful. I listened and tried to smile, but my thoughts were full of the years I had been gone. I had once thought I would never come back. After we ate, I cleaned the kitchen and went upstairs. My old room looked smaller than before. The same wallpaper was still there, but it had faded. I sat on the bed and looked at the empty space beside the window where my sister used to sit. Everything felt like a memory that had been waiting for me. That night, I could not sleep. The house was too quiet, and I kept hearing the sound of the old door downstairs moving with the wind. The next morning, my father said he had something to tell me. He looked at me with a strange sadness and said that my brother Jack was coming home. For a moment, I could not speak. Jack had not been home for 20 years. We did not even know where he lived for most of that time. He had left suddenly when I was young and had only sent a few letters. I used to wait for him by the window when I was a child, thinking he would walk up the road any day. But he never did. Now my father said he was coming back. He did not know for how long. He only said that Jack had written to him and that he was on his way. My father looked happy and worried at the same time. I said nothing because I did not know what to feel. Jack was always the one who made my father proud and then broke his heart. I had loved him too, but he never looked at me as a sister. Not really. He was a mystery, even when we were children. That day, I cleaned the guest room for him. I opened the windows to let in some air, and I saw dust dancing in the light. I remembered his things from long ago, the smell of his books, his music, and the way he used to laugh. But those memories felt like dreams. I did not know the man he had become. I wondered what he would look like now. When evening came, the sun went down slowly behind the trees. My father waited in his chair near the window. I sat with him in silence. It felt strange to wait for someone who had already left us once. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Then we heard a sound on the front step. My father lifted his head, his eyes bright for the first time in weeks. The door opened, and Jack stood there. He looked older than I expected. His hair was gray at the sides, and his eyes were tired. But there was still something kind in them. He smiled, but it was the smile of someone who did not know if he was welcome. My father stood up slowly and said his name. Then he opened his arms, and Jack stepped forward. They held each other for a long moment. I watched them, not sure if I should speak. It felt like watching two people meet after a long war. We sat together for dinner that night. Jack talked quietly, asking about old friends, about the town, about the church. My father told stories from the past, laughing softly between them. I listened, answering when they asked me something, but mostly I watched Jack. He looked at everything in the house as if it was both strange and familiar. I could see that he was trying to remember who he used to be here. After dinner, Jack went outside. I saw him standing near the trees, looking up at the sky. It was dark blue, and the first stars were coming out. When he came back in, he did not close the door all the way. My father called to him, but Jack said, "Let it stay open. It feels better that way." My father smiled a little. I did not understand what Jack meant, but I kept the words in my mind. That night, I heard Jack's footsteps in the hallway. I stayed awake, listening. I wanted to go out and talk to him, but I was afraid. We had never been close, and I did not know where to begin. There were too many years between us now. So I lay there in the dark, listening to the sound of the door downstairs moving with the wind again. The next few days passed slowly. Jack helped me with small things around the house. He fixed the garden fence, cleaned the porch, and went to town to buy groceries. My father was happy to have him home, but I could see that something was still wrong. There was a kind of sadness in Jack that he could not hide. Sometimes he looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the back steps, looking at the ground. He said quietly that he had come back because he did not know where else to go. He said he was tired of running. I did not ask what he meant. I could see it in his face. I told him that we were glad he was home. He looked at me and smiled, but there was no peace in his eyes. That evening, my father fell asleep in his chair. Jack and I sat in the kitchen. The air was cool and the window was open. He said that he had always wanted to come back, but never knew how. I told him that the door was never locked. He laughed softly and said, "I know, that is why I stayed away." I did not understand then, but I think I do now. Sometimes the hardest thing is not to leave, but to return. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more emotional English stories every week. Later that night, I checked on my father. He was still sleeping. Jack was outside again, sitting on the front steps. The door was open behind him, the same way he left it before. I stood in the doorway for a while, watching him. The wind moved through the trees, and I thought about how much had changed and how much had not. I wondered if the door would ever close again, or if it would always stay open for him, waiting. I went back to bed, but I could not sleep. The house felt different now, more alive and yet more fragile. It was strange how someone could leave a house empty for years and then make it feel full again just by coming home. I thought about all the times my father had prayed for this moment, and how quiet his heart must feel now. I thought about Jack, and about how far he must have gone inside himself to find his way back here. When morning came, I looked out the window. The door was still open, and Jack was gone for a walk. The air was fresh, and the world outside felt new again. But I knew that something was still waiting between us, something that would not go away easily. The door stayed open, but not only the one made of wood. Something else was opening too, slowly, in the space between us. Before I continue with the story, Please like, subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. The next morning began quietly. The sunlight came through the kitchen window and touched the table. I made tea for my father and cooked some eggs. Jack was still outside when I brought the tray to the living room. My father was awake and watching the door. He asked if Jack had slept well. I said yes, but I was not sure. My father smiled and said that it was good to have him home. I nodded, though I did not know how long Jack would stay. After breakfast, I went outside. The air was cold and fresh, and I could smell the grass. Jack was standing near the gate, looking down the road. I asked him if he was going somewhere. He said no. He only liked to look at the way the road turned past the trees. Then he said that he used to stand there when he was a boy, wondering how far the road could take him. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. We walked around the garden. Together, the flowers were not as bright as they had been years ago. My father had once cared for them every morning, but now his hands shook too much. Jack bent down and touched the soil. He said it was good soil, and that my father must have loved this garden. I said yes, he did, and that he still talked about it every day. Jack looked up and said, "He always had faith in things that grow." I did not answer because I knew that Jack was thinking of himself too. That afternoon, the doctor came to see my father. He was kind and quiet, and he spoke softly when he said that my father's heart was weak. He told me to let him rest and not to let him worry. I promised I would. When the doctor left, I went to tell Jack. He was sitting on the steps again, the same place he always liked. He listened to me carefully and then said that he would help me take care of our father. He said it simply, as if he had been waiting for a chance to say something good. In the days that followed, Jack was gentle with our father. He helped him walk around the house, read to him from his Bible, and sat beside him in the evenings. My father looked happy, but sometimes he watched Jack with eyes full of questions. I could feel the things they were not saying. They both wanted forgiveness, but neither knew how to ask for it. One evening, it rained. The sound of the rain filled the whole house. My father went to bed early, and Jack and I sat by the window. The smell of wet earth came in through the open door. Jack said that he had missed this sound. He said he used to lie awake as a boy and listen to the rain and think about how big the world was. He said that when he left home, he thought he would find peace, but he never did. I wanted to ask where he had gone, what he had done, but I did not. Instead, I said that it was strange how peace could hide in small things, like the sound of rain or the smell of bread. Jack looked at me and said softly that maybe peace was always waiting, but he had never been brave enough to stop and find it. I felt a deep sadness then, not only for him, but for all of us. The next morning, I went to the town to buy food. When I came back, the house was quiet. My father was asleep, and Jack was gone. I looked for him in the garden and on the road, but he was nowhere. I stood on the porch, afraid that he had left again without saying goodbye. I waited there for an hour before I saw him walking back. From the church, he looked thoughtful. He said he had gone to see Reverend Ames, our father's oldest friend. He said they had talked for a long time about grace, forgiveness, and the past. I saw something lighter in his eyes after that, but I did not ask what was said. In the evening, we ate dinner together. My father told Jack how proud he was of him for visiting the Reverend. Jack smiled, but his smile was thin. After dinner, my father went to bed early. Again, I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes. Jack sat nearby, silent. Then he said something I did not expect. He said that he had a son. My hands stopped moving. I looked at him. He said the boy lived in another town with his mother. He said he wanted to bring them both here once, but he had been afraid. I did not know what to say. I asked if the boy knew about him. Jack said yes, but that he had not seen him for years. He said the mother was kind, but her family did not want her to stay with him. He said he did not blame them. He looked down at the table and said that he had hurt too many people already. His voice was quiet, but every word felt heavy. Later, I went upstairs and sat on my bed. I could not stop thinking about what he had said. A son. A family that could have been. I thought of our father, who would never know his grandson. I thought of the boy, growing up somewhere far away, maybe wondering about his father the same way I once wondered about my brother. The next day, the air was cool and gray. My father was weaker. He called Jack to his side and asked him to read from the Bible. Jack read slowly, his voice shaking a little. My father smiled and said that his voice was the same as when he was a boy. Then he closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he had fallen asleep. Jack looked at me, frightened, but then my father opened his eyes again and said softly, "The door is open, Jack. You can come home now." Jack nodded and took his hand. I turned away because I could not hold back my tears. That night, after my father went to bed, Jack and I sat outside again. The stars were bright and cold. The trees made a soft sound in the wind. Jack said he did not know if he would stay. He said he wanted to, but he felt like a guest in his own life. I told him that sometimes being home is not about belonging, but about trying again. He said maybe I was right, but he had made too many mistakes to start over. I said that maybe mistakes are not the end, but the door we must walk through. He smiled and said that sounded like something our father would say. When I went to bed that night, I left my window open. The air came in softly, and I could hear the sound of the old door moving again. It felt like the house was breathing. I thought of my father's words and how they were not only for Jack, but for all of us. The door was open, and it would stay open, not just for the one who left, but for the one who forgave. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. Jack was already in the kitchen. He had cooked breakfast and was reading the newspaper. It felt almost normal, almost peaceful. My father came in slowly with his cane and smiled at us both. For a few minutes, the world seemed whole again, but later that day, when Jack went to town, I found a letter on his bed. It was not sealed. I knew I should not read it, but my heart made me do it. It was a letter to our father. Jack wrote that he loved him and was sorry for all the years he had wasted. He said he was afraid to stay because he did not want to bring more pain. He said he would leave soon, but would always carry home in his heart. I folded the letter and put it back where I found it. My eyes were full of tears. I wanted to stop him, to tell him that leaving would not fix anything, but I knew Jack. He was like the wind that moved through the open door. You could not hold him, only hope that one day he would come back again. That evening, I watched the sun go down through the kitchen window. My father was resting in his chair, and the house was quiet. The front door stood open, letting in the golden light. It looked warm and gentle, like forgiveness itself. I hoped Jack would walk through it once more, before it was too late. The morning after I found Jack's letter, I woke up early. The house was quiet, and the sky outside was still gray. I went downstairs and made tea, waiting to hear my father's voice, or the sound of Jack moving around. But there was nothing. The silence felt too heavy, and I knew something was different. I walked to the guest room and saw that the bed was empty. Jack's bag was gone. The letter was no longer on the table. He had left before dawn. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space where he had been. I wanted to feel angry, but I could not. It was the same feeling I had when I was a child, and woke up to find he was gone. It was a quiet pain, the kind that does not shout, but stays inside you like a slow heartbeat. When my father came into the kitchen, I told him that Jack had left. His face went still. For a moment, he looked older than ever. Then he sat down at the table and put his hands together. He said softly that he had known this would happen. I asked if he was angry. He said no, not angry, only tired. He said that sometimes people leave because they love you and cannot find a way to say it. We ate breakfast in silence. My father looked out the window often, as if he expected to see Jack coming back up the road. But no one came. After that, the days began to pass slowly again. My father grew weaker. The house felt smaller without Jack, and yet the space he left behind was large. I cleaned the rooms, cooked the meals, and read to my father in the evenings. The sound of the old door moving with the wind was still there every night, as if reminding me that it was still open. One evening, my father called me to sit with him. His face was pale, and his eyes were gentle but far away. He said he wanted to tell me something about Jack. He said that when Jack was a boy, he used to come into his room late at night to ask questions about forgiveness. He said Jack had always been afraid that he could not be good enough for God or for this family. My father said he used to tell him that God's love was wider than any mistake, but Jack never believed it. Then my father said something I will never forget. He said, "I think that is why he keeps leaving. He does not believe he can stay." I held his hand and told him that Jack had come home for him, even if only for a little while. My father smiled weakly and said that sometimes a short visit can last forever in the heart. Later that night, I sat alone by the window. The wind was soft and the stars were bright. I thought about Jack and where he might be. I wanted to believe he was somewhere safe, maybe sitting by another window, thinking of us too. I closed my eyes and said a prayer that he would find peace. The next morning, my father did not get up. His breathing was slow and his eyes were closed. I sat beside him, holding his hand. The house was full of quiet light. I talked to him softly, even though I was not sure he could hear me. I told him that I loved him and that Jack loved him too, even if he could not say it. I said that the house was full of his kindness and it would stay that way. I stayed with him until the light outside turned golden. Then his hand went still. I knew he was gone. I did not cry at first. I sat there, listening to the small sounds of the house, the clock, the wind, the door moving again. It was strange how those sounds could comfort me. When I finally stood up, the room felt both empty and full. I walked to the door and looked outside. The air was cool, and the trees were shining in the evening light. I whispered goodbye, but my voice sounded too small. The days after his death passed like a dream. People from the town came to see me. They brought food and kind words. They said my father had been a good man, that he had helped everyone, that he would be missed. I thanked them, but my heart was far away. At night, I sat in the dark living room and listened for the door. It still moved with the wind, the same slow sound. I began to feel that it was not only the door of this house, but something larger, something that belonged to all of us who wait for someone. A week later, I found another letter on the front porch. It had no stamp, only my name written in Jack's handwriting. My heart began to beat fast as I opened it. Inside, he wrote that he had tried to leave, but he could not go far. He said that he had stayed in a small town nearby, thinking about our father and about me. He said that when he heard the church bells on Sunday, he felt something he had not felt in years. He said it felt like forgiveness. He wrote that he would not come back right now because he wanted to build something first, maybe a home for his son. But he said he would visit soon, and when he did, he would walk through the same door he had left open. He wrote, "Tell Father that I am still coming home." I sat with the letter in my hands and cried quietly. I wished he had come, back before it was too late, but I knew that sometimes people need time to be ready to return. After that, I felt calmer. I began to understand that home is not only a place, it is the space we keep open in our hearts for someone we love. I kept the door open every evening. It let in the wind and the light and sometimes the smell of rain. I began to read again, to write letters, and to take walks in the garden. The flowers were blooming again, small but bright. My father would have liked that. One afternoon, as I was hanging clothes outside, I heard footsteps on the road. For a moment, I thought it was Jack, but it was only the mailman. He gave me another letter. This one was from Jack's son. He wrote that his father had told him about me and about the house. He said he wanted to visit one day. He said his father was trying to change, to be better, to live a quieter life. The letter was short, but I read it many times. I felt a strange joy, as if a part of Jack had already come home through his son's words. That night, I sat by the window again. The air was cool, and the stars were clear. I thought about everything that had happened. The house felt peaceful. It no longer felt like a place of waiting, but a place of keeping. I whispered to myself that forgiveness had found its way here at last. In the months that followed, I learned to live alone. The house became smaller, simpler. I cooked, read, and sometimes talked to the empty rooms as if my father could still hear me. The door stayed open during the days, and at night I would close it gently, not because I wanted to shut anything out, but because I had learned that forgiveness does not need a door to stay open. It lives quietly inside you. Sometimes I still imagine Jack walking up the road, older now, carrying a small bag. I imagine him stopping at the gate, taking a deep breath, and then walking through the open door. I can almost hear my father's voice, calm and loving, saying, "Welcome home, Jack." When I think of that, I feel peace. The house has become my world now. I keep it clean and bright. The garden grows again, and I talk to the flowers as my father once did. The people in town still visit sometimes, bringing bread or news. They tell me that they remember my father's kindness. I tell them that his kindness is still here, in the house, in the open door, and in the quiet air. Every evening, when the sun begins to set, I sit by the door. The light moves slowly across the floor, warm and golden. The wind touches my face, and I feel calm. I think about my father's words, about Jack's letters, and about all the waiting that has become love instead of pain. The door stays open, and I do not close it. It reminds me that forgiveness can travel far and still find its way back home. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.